channel. It's the end of the year, so I'm going to try doing something I've not actually tried before, which is watching one of my previous What Could Happen in the Coming Year programs and see how close or far out I was. I know there's a few other people who have done this year, Kira Megan, Tomo F1 to quote 2. I've actually done 2 at some point over the year, so I'm going to watch through on 1, and then the results that I had from the first one, which I had before testing, I'm going to have a look at just to see how far off I was. Right, so this one I'm going to look at is the one from July, so let's see what the hell I thought before Austria. Hi, welcome to the channel and welcome to this video. Over the last few days I've been covering F3, F2, and now we're getting to F1. My previous things had been I was setting a 10-minute video and I was talking about them. As anyone who'll tell you who watched them will know, I kind of failed a bit to cover them in those 10 minutes. It may have gone over a little bit. And this is Formula 1, so how quickly am I going to have to rush through this to try and get it done in 10? We'll find out how far we get, I guess. Okay, we're good. What could possibly go wrong? Now, I have 10 minutes set on there. You can see that. Hopefully so. Because all the technology, you know. And we are go. Right, we'll start off with the champions, Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton. This was more interesting. I've done this the other way, but hey. Honestly, coming out of the blocks this year, they're looking every bit as good as they've looked in the last few seasons. And it's interesting that even though they've had like the most dominant car and don't really need to do too much, they could have started this year with the car they finished last year and still be running very competitively. But even with all that going on, they still came up with things like the DAS system just to shift the game over, which points to motivation and belief like you need to have to be as competitive and run how they have for so long. They're impressive, and Lewis has every bit become the championship driver who knows how to play percentages, when to take risks, how to maximise every opportunity, and quite frankly, he's going to be bloody difficult to beat again this year. Valtteri is a all still very, very true. A guy who on his day can win. You know, he's beaten Lewis several times in races. But the problem is he needs to be his best day every day to be able to beat Lewis over a season. And I don't think he can do that. But, you know, you wish him best in his efforts. Seb, it depends which Seb turns up, because the way he was sounding after the announcement that he and Ferrari were going to be going their separate ways, he sounded a bit as not defeated, but using terms like, you know, with the situation that's going on with COVID, it does tend to make you think about your priorities, rearrange them and think of them differently. Tends to suggest that he's fallen a little bit out of love with F1 and is possibly enjoying the home life and being around the kids and stuff. We're glad to have him back for next season and see how much a new challenge reinvigorates him. But was he fully there this season? I don't know. I mean, he isn't, as he proved 2019, he's not that much slower than Charles, and it makes no sense in such a tight battle in the championship for Ferrari to sabotage one of their own drivers. So I think the development may have gone away from his style of driving a bit, perhaps, but I don't think there was an active thing to try and make him look any, you know, worse than he is. But that's just the season he's had for you. On the other hand, he could just decide, right, this is my last effort, I'm going to go for broke, and be charging, raring to go Seb. Opinions are divided about this. It could kind of go a bit either way, but it makes the season more interesting. Charles Leclerc, as everyone knows, I am a Charles Leclerc fan. I think he is a very gifted driver. But I don't think he's the finished package yet. I think by his own setting, you know, he enjoyed having Seb as a teammate because Seb had a good technical understanding of the car. Seb is kind of has an interest in engineering himself or what have you, so he would ask questions that possibly wouldn't have occurred to Charles. Charles is still young, he has raw pace to burn, but, as times this season have shown, there's still lessons to be learnt. If anything, this year I think he was overdriving the car, trying to overcompensate for it, and he was taking chances that perhaps under different circumstances, if the car had been more competitive, he wouldn't have taken. But I could be wrong, he might be. I think he'll mellow a little bit and become the more complete package over time, but I don't think he's still quite there yet. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes this year and how much Charles has learnt last season and where he can pick up and progress himself without having Seb next to him in the car potentially. But so he's a guy who will win championships in the future if the car is capable of winning the championships. Max Verstappen, he's never dull. You hear the commentator talking about Max, you're always expecting something to happen. He's just that kind of driver. He's a very exciting driver. He is. I think he could possibly be the main challenger to Lewis this year. Which, put my Ferrari hat aside to try and be objective for a second. And he certainly would have been a main challenger if the cars had been a bit more even. The fact he was that close to Valtteri for second is ridiculous, considering how superior the Mercedes was over every other car on that grid. Alex Albon, he's got a lot to prove this year, I think. Basically, he needs to, while he doesn't need to be Max, he does need to be in the fight with the Ferraris and trying to knock points. Well, he was kind of in the fight with the Ferraris, just not where he needed to be. Points off them and trying to take points away from Valtteri, maybe. He needs to be mingling and mixing it up with the others in the top six, which he should do because he's had more time with the car, more time to get used to the team, more time to gel, which last year was just him getting chucked around from left to right, so he didn't really get the settling in period that most drivers would get. So I don't think we've seen the best of Alex yet, and we still haven't. It's a weird one. At the tail end of the 2019 season, I genuinely think he looked stronger than he's looked for all of 2020. So whether the car development has just slipped away even more from what he liked, I don't know. But there's no justifiable reason why Alex struggled as much as he did. The improvement and the progression we wanted to see and we were expecting to see just never materialised. Carlos Sainz moving to Ferrari obviously next year, but him and McLaren seem to have split very amicably, and as much as possible I don't think McLaren, especially in their fight with Racing Point and Renault, are going to be wanting to sacrifice points by not backing him. They'll want to treat him fair the whole way, I should imagine, because he's solid and reliable point scorer. Done very well for them last year, which is why he's now been offered a contract at Ferrari. So I fully expect, he'll be with the sharp end of the midfield again. Lando Norris, I think he got a little bit unlucky last year. I don't think the points gap between him and Sainz was entirely reflective, but Sainz's greater experience did show through. I actually think Lando, not wanting to sound like a Lando stan here, but I've followed his career since 2016. I actually think Lando probably has more potential than Carlos does, and in the years to come, maybe better. But currently, the experience that Sainz has gives him the edge. Still hold with that. Daniel Ricciardo, settling in time at Renault. That's all gone a bit out of the window. There's been a lot of talk about, between various people as to whether he'll even see the season out, because him and Cyril already don't like each other very much. I think it's only going to take a couple of races where things don't go to plan before they're seriously not talking to each other. So that could end up all going completely wrong. Esteban Ocon, well, it's weird how the Daniel thing worked out, because I don't know whether maybe it's a personality trait of Daniel's or whatever, where he can just manage to whatever's going on, maintain a good relationship or a strong relationship with people. Because come, say, June, July time, it looked like that was all going to hell and out the window. And for them to have finished as strongly and as so cohesive a unit as they have, and to get the podiums, has genuinely been a surprising how together that team has been this year. You've been out of the car for a year and a half, not racing properly now, so that could go anyway. There's no way of saying that, but he's a talented guy, so as soon as he's up to speed, he should be doing stuff, and obviously Renault will probably be throwing the majority of their support behind him. So I can see him finishing ahead of Daniel by the season's end, which I wouldn't have said a couple of months ago. Well, he didn't, but he was definitely a lot closer towards the season's end. How he does in Endo, that will be interesting. Sergio Perez, if there's a podium going, spare or one open, you can see him getting it. If there's a win going, the Tracing Point, as it's called, or the pink Mercedes, just because it won a title last year doesn't mean at the point that they started copying it that it might still be that competitive. And it looked good in testing, but Mercedes' ability to get on top of it and the way it was, and they'll have fitted upgrades since Racing Point decided to base their ideas on how it looked. So the version Racing Point have got is not necessarily the end result. So while in theory it could get potentially podiums and what have you, on the other hand, the possibility for development might be less than other teams. So the more races in the season, the longer the season goes in, they might slide down the competitive order again, especially with how it's been with the big... Well, they finished the season probably as strongly as they started it with the best car in the midfield. The issues with it were a lack of consistency, losing the 15 points at the start over whether they were copying it or not. The COVID issues they had with their drivers ending up off, Lance having a run of bad luck, for want of a better way of putting it, and probably had a bit of inconsistency after he got his COVID scare. But there's no denying, I don't think, that they were certainly the third, if not sometimes the second quickest car out there for the majority of the season. Gaps, and nobody really knows where the competitive order is at the moment. Lance Stroll, if he sorts out his Saturdays, he'll be fantastic. But we've been saying that for about 2 years now, and it still hasn't happened. So we want to see him achieve what he clearly can achieve, but there's something in the way, and that is on a Saturday he just doesn't turn up. Pierre Gasly, tale of two Gaslys last year. First part of the year, could not get comfortable with the car, struggling to make it work. Had his better moments, but not consistent enough form, and every time he thought he was an improvement, he then took a step back. Consistently pretty strong this year, though. Very impressed by some of his performances. Got everything I think he could get out of that AlphaTauri. And then he got dropped, and suddenly it's like, oh, hello, Pierre Gasly has come back, and he started doing amazing things in the Toro Rosso. So how he does in the AlphaTauri this year, I think him and his teammate Daniel need to have cracking seasons, basically, because they're not looking at necessarily getting back into the Red Bull even at this point, because that's all on Alex, how Alex does. They're going to be looking more behind them at guys like Yuri Vips. Yuki wasn't even on my radar at this point. We just weren't expecting him to do what he did. So it was Yuri who was maybe thinking of. How it's all played out was not... It's sort of half what I expected, but not kind of what I expected. Daniel Kvyat, I think, is a talented driver. I don't think he deserves to be out of Formula One, but with the circumstances, with the driver program that Red Bull have, and he was on limited time there. I'd like to see in that car eventually. But they're wanting to do well, almost to put themselves on the market if someone like Haas decides they want to drive a change. If you can do well in the AlphaTauri, then you'll do well in a team like that. So it's just advertising themselves to the wider market, I think, at this point, for both him and Daniel Kvyat, who's kind of the same boat. They're both ex-dropped boys of Red Bull. And they're only still in Formula One because of the lack of other alternative options, you kind of feel, unfortunately. But yeah, looking past them, we go on to Alfa Romeo. Kimi Raikkonen, I think it depends just how Kimi's going to feel this year, because he might come back in and, having had the break, be pumped and ready to go and be absolutely motivated. On the other hand, the time he's had at home with his family, he might just think, you know, I can't be bothered with this anymore. I like the racing, but the being away from the family, the travelling around, the whatever, it's a bit, you know, especially as Roman gets older, starts school and stuff, he's going to be seeing a lot less of him. So this age, well. So I can see him just being a bit done with it, to be honest with you, after the end of this season. Gio has an absolute point. Ferrari Driver Academy drivers wish he was done with it, perhaps. To prove there's so many drivers from the Ferrari Academy alone nipping at his heels, wanting that seat, that basically he needs to have a great performance. You know, he needs to prove that, you know, he can be the guy who can sit there and, you know, a solid benchmark for Robert Schwartzman or Mick Schumacher or, you know, Marcus, hopefully, who might come up into that seat to be beside him if he can keep hold of it. I'm so good at sticking to timers. 4 left, I'll continue quickly. K-Mag has great performance, he's an aggressive driver, can be quite an exciting one sometimes. Give him the car, he can do good work.
Stand by that still.
Romain Grosjean, which Roman's going to turn up? Because the Roman with 10 podiums, or the Roman who crashed into the pit wall coming out of the pits in Silverstone. You want it to be the former, but you're always expecting it to be the latter, which is a pretty shame for the way his career is likely to be remembered. Because more often than not, he's been better than that, but it's always the bad moments you remember.
Yep. It's very much a shame the way that Roman's career ended. Unfortunately, that's Formula One, and it's harsh. You know, hopefully we'll see him racing in something else. If not, hopefully he'll manage to enjoy his Lego and his cookery. But, you know, 10 podiums is a better return for a career than quite a few drivers have got, so fair play.
George Russell, people are counting the days to wanting to see him in the Mercedes. He'd done everything he could do with the Williams last year, but with Robert Kubica coming into the team, having been out of Formula One so long, and with his injury, he's not the Robert of old. There's no way of judging really how well George did. From his testing that he's done in the Mercedes, you say that he's clearly very talented. From his junior days, you'd know he was very talented in them.
Basically, with Williams being how they were and how strong they were in the field and the car they'd given them, and with George not having the strongest teammates, there was no way of quantifying him. And I'd have said that right up until Sakir when he got that run out in the Merc. And that really did point out exactly how much he's being held back in that Williams. You know, he's doing everything he can do and did everything he could do that year. Luck's just not with him.
But that doesn't necessarily mean you'll do well at the sharp end in Formula One. And so while we all think he's a potential future world champion and that he could crack it, and in the Mercedes he'd be doing really, really well, until he's actually in it, there's no way of saying for definite that, yeah, this is, you know, he's got it.
And now we know.
He should do. But we don't know with enough certainty yet. Personally, I think he will, but there you go. Nicholas Latifi, always such a difficult one to judge. His junior career didn't really show massive amounts. When you hear he's going to get into Formula One, it's not the name that excites you, you know. But he's apparently a very nice guy, not that that necessarily counts for everything, but again, it's that thing of being able to drive one car one way doesn't necessarily mean you can't drive a different car a different way. He might come into Formula One and the F1 car will suit his driving style perfectly, and he might be properly competitive. And you can't hope for him it does turn out that way.
I think he did everything he could do. I don't think his career will necessarily be remembered as being particularly stellar, but he's not disgraced himself in that car. You know, I don't think anyone was really expecting him to be properly challenging George or anything, but he's brought the car home more often than not, and we saw in Austria when he finished 11th. You know, all it takes is like one thing of just holding it together and other people getting it wrong, and you could get that result. And Nicholas, if he stays consistent, there's nothing to say he couldn't be the guy to get it.
Or he could be trailing around the back of the grid on his own, and that would just be unfortunate. But at this point, until he actually goes racing and does some laps in a Formula 1 car, it's very hard to tell how that's going to go. Personally, I think he'll be about as competitive as the Williams allows him to be.
Very much the case.
However competitive that will be with all the issues they've had going on. Because the thing is, even if they were running close to the Haas and the other teams prior to COVID-19, obviously with all the issues they've had since then, the loans, are we going to be sold, are we going to whatever else, how much has the team's mind and money been on actually trying to upgrade and improve the car compared to, say, some of the other teams?
Oh, yeah.
But we'll see. My opinions on the season is it's probably going to be between Lewis and Max. I would love, absolutely, of course, for Ferrari to be up there. I doubt they were as in trouble as testing showed. But it's difficult to be optimistic at this point. So I'm kind of... It's going to be difficult for Lewis not to win his 7th championship, I think. But, you know, we'll see how it all goes, and that's the joy of it, you know. F1 is nothing but, if it was absolutely predictable and everything went as expected, nobody would watch it. So we'll see how it goes.
All very true.
Anyway, thank you for watching. Leave your comments in the bit below. Good night. Bye-bye.
Now, obviously, we've looked at that video now, and I could go into the other one and my predictions in there, which I'll include, you know, at the end of it, and leave a link to in the comments and what have you. But I'm probably not going to include that one on here, because otherwise this video will end up being far too long, and that's not really what I'm after. So if people want to go and look at that one, that's brilliant. You can laugh at me if you want to. Be warned, the audio on it is probably likely to be dodgy because it's pre-microphone, so it's just recording on whatever the hell was on the laptop. But anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed my look back at some of the comments I may have made. And he says, yeah, and you know, see you all very soon. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.